Hello everybody and welcome to PowerPlayChess. It's not your usual face. Once again, Daniel King needs a little rest from his daily reports for you. And it's me, Grandmaster Yannick Pelletier, who replaces him today to make a short recap on the Magnus Invitational, which is taking place nowadays online in those days of lockdown. By the way, hope every one of you is feeling well, is healthy. It's difficult times, and we're happy that Magnus Carlsen managed to put up this idea, gather this great field to make it happen. This online tournament at the highest possible level, and he entertains us, they entertain us, and we're really grateful for this beautiful event. Today is the eighth day of this great event, Magnus Carlsen Invitational, and two matches on the menu: Nakamura, Nepomniachtchi, and Ding Liren against Giri. I have decided for today's highlight to take the very first game of the mini match, Nakamura Nepomniachtchi. The other match, Ding Liren Giri, was pretty interesting as well. Both players won a game with black each, so that they had to play an Armageddon to decide who takes the extra point, and it was the Chinese who managed to prevail with the black pieces in that Armageddon blitz. Anyway, back to the match, Nakamura Nepomniachtchi, where only one game was decided. That was this very first game of the match. The next three ended in draws. So what happened in that game? Nakamura with white going for e4, and you can see Nepomniachtchi going for his winner French. Once again, he's been doing this lately quite often. Remember the candidates tournament, where he's played it twice, albeit against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave without success. He got actually wiped out, and Daniel King analyzed that game for you here on PowerPlayChess. In this very game, Nakamura going for Queen G4 is pretty interesting to see what Nepomniachtchi has prepared against what is considered to be the critical move here in that line, Queen G4. And the answer is C takes D4, Queen takes G7, Rook G8, Queen takes H7, and Queen C7. This very lively line, a very classical line with many complications. Personally, as a French player and winner, let's say former specialist, since I haven't been playing it for many years, but I used to know it pretty well. I've always considered this to be very, very dangerous for black, and I liked it as a child, let's say, when you really want to create chaos on the board. But later, when I became a GM, and I felt like it was not really my type of thing, so I tried to find some other ways, and it felt dangerous objectively. And to be fair, I mean, black has practical chances. The position is very complicated. White has some problems to determine which place to choose for his king, whether to leave it in the center or to try and put it at some awkward place. But basically, I always thought that this pawn majority, and especially this passed h pawn for white, was a long-term set which couldn't really end up favorably for black. So that's why I never really took it up and never really liked it. So the main move here is clearly knight e2. This is the classical main move. Knight e2, you play knight bc6, f4, and so on and so forth. But recently, Queen d3 was found by German Grandmaster Huschenbett in his match of the World Cup against Neidich, and it's been played quite often recently by some good players. One of the main line here, there are basically two main moves, and Queen takes e5 was played in that stem game. It's always also been played, but by some other French specialists, although it's, just a few good grandmasters have tried it with white. This Queen d3, Heimann, Van Forest as well. So it's still pretty often open. I mean, there is no real verdict yet, but things look pretty good for white with this queen d3. In any case, after queen takes c5, the idea is to play knight d2, takes on c3, and queen takes c3. The endgame is certainly favorable for white with that h passed pawn, as I said, and two bishops. Looks good for white generally, so black isn't forced to take, but on the other hand, does he really want to waste another tempo with his queen? This looks pretty good for white. And Nepomniachtchi went for d takes c3, knight f3, not the only move, but definitely a logical one. Well, here if you try and go after the e5 pawn with a move like knight d7, white can answer with bishop f4, protecting the pawn. And yes, you can play knight g6, for instance, but it's not that easy to get that pawn on e5. I mean, there is always going to be a pin, and so not maybe such a clear position, but white seems to be all right. And knight bc6, I think we can simply take on c3 here. I don't really see too much for black. So Nepomniachtchi tried b6, and this is a novelty apparently, not illogical and quite a typical French move here to play bishop a6, try to exchange the so-called bad bishop in the French, bishop a6. On the other hand, we're gonna see he's gonna implement this idea in the game, and it's not gonna be anything special, very successful. And here just Nakamura going for h4, logical. And maybe he should have tried another move first. Maybe bishop a6 was a bit premature. Knight f5 comes to mind, but here we can maybe just push the pawn, h5, bishop a6, go back to d1, takes on f1, and as usual king takes f1. And I really like white's setup on the king side, with the rook on h1 supporting the passed pawn, the king on f1 protecting g2. It can go to g1 if being checked by the queen, for instance. So this whole setup there is very harmonious, and I like the bishop on c1. Can enter the game very quickly. Bishop g5, bishop f6, again supporting the advance of the h-pawn. So I'm not really optimistic for black here. So he tried bishop a6. This allows the additional queen d4. So if he goes knight bc6 now, queen takes c3, not the only move, but if you want to keep e5, it's probably best to go like this, at least for a while. D4 takes on d4, probably critical. Queen takes e5. Here you have to go back to e2. Again, the exchange of queens would clearly favor white. So he has to try and keep queen e4, and we can go bishop e3 with ideas such as maybe knight g3 or just h4, h5. It's not so easy to understand what black is going to do. There is also a move like maybe first f3 and then move the knight, exchange on f1. White can basically be happy, but at least that position looks a bit more messy than what we got in the game. Take a look. Bishop takes f1, king takes f1, knight d7, and just h5. And now black has a problem because his counterplay against the pawn on e5, which is basically what he's playing for, doesn't work, or not yet at least. If he goes knight c6, there's queen takes c3, and you can't take on e5 because of this pin here. If you, well, the queen on c7 is hanging, so you can't take with the knight. And if you take with the queen, well, see, the king is on f1. There's no queen takes e5 check for black, which means the knight on c6 is hanging with a check, and white is winning. So this doesn't really work. That's the reason why Nepomniachtchi goes rook c8 in order to protect the queen in this tactical sequence there. But white has a move now, and he goes h6, just pushes his pawn, and it's, well, as usual in chess, it's mostly a matter of one tempo, and here it's no exception to the rule. If black had a tempo and if the pawn was still on h5, you could go after e5. Here it's not really good, because after knight c6 you could just play h7, rook h8, and now there is this nasty reply, queen g4, trying to get to g7 with the queen. And if you take here, just queen g7, knight g6, and here I'm gonna try and play bishop g5. That's not the only strong move here, but certainly a very natural one to play. Black is tied up. He can't move the knight from d7. There are always gonna be some moves like bishop f6. You can't move the king, you can't coordinate your rooks, so you're basically tied. Rook h8, it has to stay there. The knight on g6 has to protect it. So you can give a check with the queen, but you're not going to go very far. And white's play is easy, just rook e1, maybe even rook h6, threatening to take on g6. I think black is basically losing here. So Nepomniachtchi tried to find salvation with the exchange of queens. So queen c4 takes, rook takes c4, but white has very natural moves here to increase his lead, his advantage. Bishop g5, rook h8, and just g3. This is this kind of little natural move, which is not so obvious. I mean, white may be tempted to look for a direct solution, but normally what you can do as well is try to understand what kind of coordination you need to achieve between your pieces. And here both rooks need to be coordinated. That's why he goes g3 and king g2, knight c6, rook a e1 to protect e5, b5. Well, this is a imperceptible inaccuracy by black. It was very difficult to understand that this pawn on b5 would be hanging within like 6-7 moves in a tactical sequence, but even then it's not so easy to understand what to do. When Nepomniachtchi played b5 very quickly, he could have tried rook a4, maybe king f8. Such moves are sensible and would perhaps be a better try, but it makes no doubt that white is better here. This pawn on h6, tying down the rook, and the whole position is just unhealthy for black. Well, let's take a look at what happened b5. Here Nakamura thought for about a minute. Well, this is a rapid game, so he doesn't really have too much time. But he thought for about 1 minute, and he found a very good plan. What he wants to achieve is knight g5. There's the bishop on g5, so he would be tempted to move the bishop, try and make knight g5, push the pawn to h7. So a logical move would be bishop f4, but here there is some counterplay after rook a4 and just going back to h8. Yeah, you can play h7, but what's coming next? That's not so clear. So Nakamura found bishop f6. Well, the immediate threat is to go knight g5, so you have no choice. You have to take that bishop. Pawn takes, and now with this move e takes f6, many lines are being opened. The e file, the 5th rank, and we're going to see that all this plays into white's hands. Rook a4 now, he is not going to play knight g5, the tempting knight g5, but he has a much better idea, which is rook h5, and after a move like king f8, because the pawn on d5 is attacked thanks to the pin, king f8, now I play rookeh1, and I'm going to play rook g5, rook g7, and I'm going to say goodbye. It's just over if I can do this. And there's nothing black can really do against that, except perhaps rook g4, but this is pretty similar to the game, and not going to save black. He went rook g4 immediately, parrying the immediate threat knight g5, which, well, is logical, but wasn't ideal here. And here Nakamura going for rook h5 as earlier, and he has actually 2 threats here, knight g5 as usual, but also rook takes d5, and you can't really parry both ideas. If you play king f8, knight to g5, Now, well, if you go back to h8, I can simply push the pawn and slowly prepare to get in with my pieces. The rook g4 will be expelled, maybe by f3 or maybe even king f3. And then I'm gonna be able to help my pawn h7 promote. And if you sacrifice the exchange, which is the best solution according to the computer here, well, frankly speaking, after rook e3 here, you can certainly protect c3, but then I protect f6, and it's simply not good for black. I mean, not completely over yet, but we're on the right track to winning the game with white. He went rook g6, trading the pawn d5 for the pawn h6. Well, first on the way he takes f6, rook c5. That's a little accurate move which has to be played. I mean, it's not that easy to see it in a rapid game, but first you hit the knight, making sure that you know, it's going to be placed on a worse square, e7, rook takes b5. Takes on h6. Well, take a look. We have here equal material on the board, 4 pawns each, but it's true that white can force, can win a pawn by force by getting check, and rook b7. It wins the a7 pawn. That's why we understand why hitting the knight from c6 first was pretty important. But Nakamura actually didn't go for rook b7. He tried another move, a good move as well, knight e5. Just here, if you play rook b7 and take on a7, look at the nice part which is being played by the knight on f3, protecting h2. So basically those two rooks on the h file are useless. I mean, of course they had to take this pawn h6, but they are basically useless, no activity displayed by them. So white wins the pawn a7 and is very safe, just probably winning here. What he did was good too. Knight e5 checks at king c7 and rook eb1. Just threatening to enter and say well, that's the king is going to succumb. Well, here Nepomniachtchi collapsed, played the decisive mistake. He had to try f6, knight g4, rook g6. We can go back to e3, and I don't think the outcome is really in doubt here. White is so much more active than black, and he can certainly get the c3 pawn within 1-2 moves, or the a7 pawn is weak as well. So basically it's a matter of time until white wins the game. Well, after knight c6, the game was over in no time. Rook 8 b7 check, king d6, just knight takes f7, and he loses the exchange. h6 is being attacked, so he took, and black resigned here. It's an exchange and a pawn. c3 is hanging, so clearly no reason to play on this position for black. So Nakamura, well, thanks to this win, took the lead in the match, and the game ended with 3 more draws. With black, he was pretty solid in his queen's gambit against d4. So we can say that actually Nakamura got a very, well, I wouldn't say quiet win in that mini match against Nepomniachtchi, but it was definitely convincing. And thanks to that, he clinches on to his second place in the event. Remember what happened in the very first day, on the very first day of the event, the very first round, which he lost. Nakamura lost on Armageddon against Carlsen, so that was 2 points for Carlsen, 1 for him, for Nakamura. And since then, he's won all his matches outright in the rapid games, which means he has 10 points now in the standings, just 1 point behind the world champion Magnus Carlsen 11. So we have a very interesting race at the top. Caruana has 8 points, Ding Liren as well. They are not out of contention for the first place. Anyway, a very interesting event, and I'm sure we're going to see a few more exciting days until the end. Remember that they're playing a close tournament, and after that, the 4 first finishers will play a final round. So basically anything can happen, the main goal being to end in the first 4. I'm going to see you in a few days again after Daniel King has taken over again. So thanks a lot for your attention. See you soon.